i2X was founded just before I joined DOE in 2022. It was launched as the first program focused on tackling interconnection issues, providing technical assistance, and establishing best practices to serve as a resource for the country. From its inception, one of the main pillars of i2X was drafting a roadmap to codify those interconnection best practices for both transmission and distribution interconnection. When i2X were looking to develop the roadmap, the plan was to have the roadmap be both transmission and distribution in one document. We actually decided to split that, and we released a transmission interconnection roadmap about a year prior to the DER interconnection roadmap. I'm sure you can imagine trying to put all those ideas into one document became like a gargantuan effort, and really trying to coalesce different ideas, understanding the reader level, very difficult sort of needle to thread. So it made more sense to split them. And we were lucky enough to get the DR roadmap out the door just prior to the Trump inauguration. So we were not stymied by any sort of political winds that have changed. Scale matters, and it's probably the most important element here when discussing transmission versus distribution. The FERC, they have authority over the ISOs, and they can kind of set rules out to try and have some sort of level set of how they should operate. Even within that, there's still some independence of how the ISOs actually choose to implement what FERC tells them to do, and they can make proposals around, we want to modify X, Y, or Z thing based on our particular system. As we've seen, insane bottlenecks have been happening in the transmission side, not as much as distribution, but there's also issues there as well. A lot of those bottlenecks are just due to the scale and the number of projects trying to interconnect, because for the last decade or so, renewable assets have been the cheapest way to get new generation onto the system. So people are just trying to race and run and do so. On the distribution side, the biggest issue has been the sort of balkanization of American electric grid and electric system. As you can imagine, any country that's like that, it's very difficult to have sort of standards around like what each individual utility should be doing or what each state should be doing, and there are issues inherent with that. There's so much difference within the different states themselves in terms of how utilities approach interconnection best practices, and you really see a lot of issues, particularly for states wherein there could be some massive IOUs that have particular processes of how they deal and tackle interconnection, but then you'll have small co-ops and munis that have their own set of issues based on the kind of characteristics of their grids, that really the best practices employed by the IOUs are very difficult to translate even intrastate. So the problems are myriad and they're varied, but ultimately a lot of the solutions in terms of like streamlining using automation and different kinds of technologies can apply and be actively used for both. It's just a matter of really understanding the differences in scale and figuring out how best to thread that needle. At a high level, the roadmap is really trying to solve the problem that interconnection has become the major bottleneck of DR deployment. So even in places where there's strong policy support and mature markets, we're still seeing very long interconnection timelines that are unpredictable. Costs are often showing up late and disproportionate even size of the projects. And the processes just weren't scaling, as well as the DR volumes were increasing. As discussed before, the scale really matters. In many markets, they've developed reasonably efficient pathways for residential solar or even behind the meter commercial projects. But once you moved into larger distribution connected resources like community solar or front of the meter DERs, the cracks really start to show. Those projects are more likely to face long timelines, detailed studies, and significant upgrade costs. And the technology as well plays a really big role. The rapid growth of energy storage, for example, has challenged a lot of the existing interconnection frameworks, which were often written with one-way generation in mind. Many states, they're still working through fundamental questions like how do you classify storage? Is it generation? Is it load? Is it both? How do you study it appropriately on the distribution system? Overall, it was a sense that in the US, while states were making a lot of progress, it is still very apparent that interconnection had become the primary bottleneck for DER deployments, and really understanding within different states what are the different capabilities of the utilities in the states to actually adopt different best practices to be able to mitigate these issues, and how best can we create a document that's serviceable, a document that actually has different pathways or different sort of solution sets that one can cater to one's individual capabilities at the moment. Because what one small municipal utility can do is different than what an IU can do. So really trying to find how can we pinpoint solution sets that are universally able to correct a lot of these issues and mitigate these issues, but also solution sets that are catered to the capabilities of the different utilities.